She signed the papers with a trembling hand, giving up her home, her dignity, and the love of her life, while he laughed in her face with his new younger mistress. He told her she was nothing but a decoration he no longer needed. He told her she would starve without him. He was wrong. 5 years later, he walked into a boardroom to beg for a bailout to save his crumbling empire, only to realize the faceless CEO holding his life in her hands was the very woman he discarded. This is the story of Eleanor's silence, Derek's arrogance, and the terrifying precision of a woman scorned. You might want to sit down for this one because the ending changes everything. The rain in Seattle was relentless, a gray curtain that seemed to wash away the colors of the world, leaving everything in stark, brutal monochrome. Inside the sterile conference room of Harrison Ford and Associates, the atmosphere was colder than the storm outside. Eleanor Vance sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple beige coat that had seen better days, a sharp contrast to the Italian wool suit her husband's soon-to-be ex-husband, Derek Vance, was wearing. Next to him sat Jessica, a woman 10 years Eleanor's junior, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression, occasionally popping gum with a wet, sticky sound that echoed in the silence. "Let's get this over with, Ellie," Derek said, not even looking at her. He was checking his Rolex, a gift Eleanor had saved for 2 years to buy him for his 40th birthday. "I have a flight to Aspen in 2 hours. Jessica gets ski sick if we rush." Mr. Henderson, Derek's high-priced attorney, slid a thick stack of documents across the mahogany table. "As discussed, Mrs. Vance, you forfeit any claim to Vance Logistics. You forfeit the marital home in Mercia Heights. In exchange, you receive a one-time settlement of $25,000, and you retain your vehicle." $25,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover rent in the city for 6 months. But the real dagger was buried in the fine print on page 42. "And the NDA?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Standard procedure," Henderson said smoothly, though his eyes lacked warmth. "You are forbidden from discussing the origins of the Vance Logistics proprietary algorithm. You cannot claim credit for its development, nor can you discuss the private financial matters of Mr. Vance." Derek scoffed, leaning back in his leather chair. "It's just a precaution, Ellie. We both know you were just the housewife who made the coffee while I did the real work. I just don't want you getting desperate later and trying to sell some sob story to the press." Eleanor looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the man she had stayed up with for 3 years straight, learning Python and C++ by candlelight because they couldn't afford electricity bills in the early days. This was the man whose code she had debugged while he slept in a drunken stupor. The algorithm that made Vance Logistics a multi-million-dollar giant wasn't his. It was hers. She had written the core kernel, the ghost path logic that optimized shipping routes while he was out networking at bars. But she had no proof. He had wiped her laptop. He had put everything in his name. And now he had the best lawyers money could buy. "If I sign this," Eleanor said, her voice steadying, "I want one thing." Jessica looked up from her phone, smirking. "The car is a 2015 Toyota Honey. Take it and go." Eleanor ignored her. "I want my maiden name back. Immediately. And I want the dog." Derek laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The Mutt Buster be my guest. Consider it a bonus. As for the name, please. I'd prefer you didn't use Vance anymore anyway. It's a brand now." Eleanor picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. She felt a phantom kick in her stomach, a secret she had discovered only yesterday. She was 3 months pregnant. If she told him now, the divorce would stall. He would fight for custody just to spite her, or worse, he would use the child as leverage to ensure she never spoke a word. She needed to be free, even if it meant being destitute. She signed, Eleanor Sterling. "Done," Henderson said, snatching the papers away as if afraid she might burn them. Derek stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't offer a goodbye. He simply turned to Jessica. "Ready, babe. Let's get out of this depressing room." As they reached the door, Derek paused and looked back over his shoulder. Good luck, Ellie. You're gonna need it. The real world is a lot harder than sitting at home waiting for me. The door clicked shut. Eleanor sat alone in the conference room. She didn't cry. The time for tears was over. She placed a hand on her stomach. He thinks he won, little one, she whispered to the empty room. He thinks he owns the code, but he forgot one thing. He owns the version 1.0. The code is in my head, and I'm about to write an update he never saw coming. 6 months later, the glamour of the corporate world felt like a distant memory. Eleanor, now going exclusively by Ms. Sterling, was living in a cramped studio apartment in the gritty industrial district of East Hastings. The walls were paper-thin, vibrating every time the elevated train roared past, which was every 14 minutes. Her bank account was dwindling. The $25,000 had largely gone to medical bills for the pregnancy and securing the apartment. She was showing now 6 months along, hiding her bump under oversized hoodies as she worked double shifts at Sal's Diner. It was a Tuesday night, raining again, when the humiliation caught up to her. She was wiping down a greasy table when a group of businessmen walked in. They were loud, wearing suits that cost more than Eleanor's entire year of rent. And in the center of them, laughing at a joke, was a man she recognized. Not Derek, but one of his former associates. Marcus Trent. Eleanor froze. She turned her back, pulling her cap down low, praying he wouldn't recognize the woman serving him coffee. She approached the table, keeping her head down. "Coffee black. And keep them coming, sweetheart," Marcus said, not even looking at her face. He was busy boasting. "So Vance tells me, Marcus, the logistics are slowing down. And I tell him, Derek, the code is glitching. But the guy doesn't know how to fix it. He fired the maintenance team. Vance Logistics is bleeding money on the Trans-Pacific routes, and he's too busy skiing in the Alps to notice." Eleanor's hand trembled as she poured the coffee. The code is glitching. Of course it was. The Ghost Path algorithm she wrote had a memory leak issue that needed manual purging every 6 months. She had always done it quietly while Derek slept. Derek didn't even know the maintenance command existed. She retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding. Derek was failing. But that wasn't enough. Him failing meant he would just golden parachute out with millions while the company burned. She didn't want him to just fail. She wanted to surpass him. That night after her shift, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat at her small, rickety kitchen table with a second-hand laptop she had bought from a pawn shop. Buster, the golden retriever she had saved, slept at her feet. She opened a terminal window. "He has the infrastructure," she muttered, typing rapidly. "But he lacks the brain." She wasn't going to fix his code. She was going to build something better. A decentralized logistics network based on blockchain verification. Something Derek, with his old-school mentality, thought was a scam. She called it Project Ether. But she needed money. Serious money. No bank would loan a pregnant waitress with no credit history $1 million. 2 weeks later, desperate and with her due date approaching, Eleanor walked into the public library. It was the only place with free high-speed fiber internet. She set up her workstation in the back corner. She began frequenting a niche online forum for angel investors using the handle Ghostwriter. She posted a portion of her code, just a snippet, but enough to prove the efficiency of her algorithm. It was a bait. For 3 days, nothing. Then a direct message appeared. User Titan V. Message. Your syntax is elegant. It reminds me of the early architecture of Vance Logistics, but evolved. Who are you? Eleanor hesitated. She knew who Titan V was. It was a rumor in the industry, an anonymous venture capitalist known for high-risk, high-reward bets. Ghostwriter. I am the person who wrote the Vance architecture, and I'm the person who has made it obsolete. Titan V. Bold claim. Prove it. Fix the traffic gridlock currently paralyzing the port of Los Angeles. I have ships stuck there. If you can optimize the routing using your theory, I will give you 5 minutes of my time. It was a test, a massive one. Eleanor didn't have access to the port's mainframe, but she could simulate the data. She spent the next 48 hours awake drinking cheap instant coffee, her back aching from the pregnancy. She wrote a script that reorganized the container logic based on weight distribution rather than arrival time. She sent the simulation file to Titan V. An hour later her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello," she answered, her voice raspy. "Ms. Sterling." A deep elderly voice resonated on the line. "My name is Arthur Penhaligon. I believe you just saved my shipping company $4 million in theoretical fuel costs. I'm sending a car for you." "I can't," Eleanor stammered, looking down at her stained hoodie and swollen belly. "I'm not presentable." "My dear," Arthur said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, "I don't care if you're wearing a potato sack. I care about the brain that wrote that code. The car is a Maybach. It's outside the library. Do not keep the driver waiting." Eleanor packed her laptop. She walked outside. Sure enough, a sleek black car longer than her apartment was idling at the curb. The driver, a stoic man in a gray suit, opened the door. As she slid into the leather interior smelling of expensive cedar and rain, she realized this was the turning point. She wasn't going back to the diner. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The tired, scared woman was gone. In her place was the architect of a new empire. But she had to be careful. If Derek found out she was building a competitor, he would sue her into oblivion using the NDA. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Take me to Mr. Penhaligon," Eleanor said, "and then take me to a lawyer who knows how to incorporate a company that doesn't officially exist." Arthur Penhaligon's estate in the Pacific Palisades was a fortress of glass and steel, overlooking the churning ocean, a stark contrast to the cramped diner Eleanor had left behind. But the luxury offered no comfort to the storm brewing inside her. She sat in Arthur's library, surrounded by first-edition books and the scent of aged tobacco, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. "You are asking for a ghost to run a war," Arthur said, pacing the room. He was 80 years old, with skin like parchment paper, but his eyes were sharp blue flint. He leaned on a cane topped with a silver hawk. "If Derek Vance finds out you are behind this new venture, he will bury you in litigation before you write a single line of code. The NDA is ironclad." "The NDA covers Vance Logistics' proprietary data," Eleanor countered, her voice gaining strength. She pulled up a schematic on her laptop. "It protects the code I wrote 5 years ago. But Ether isn't based on that code. It's based on a polymorphic algorithm that changes every time it's observed. It's not just a logistics program, Arthur. It's an artificial intuition engine. It doesn't just predict shipping routes. It predicts human error." Arthur stopped pacing. He looked at the screen, then at Eleanor. "And you wrote this in a library while waiting tables." "Hunger is a powerful motivator," she replied. "So is rage." Arthur stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching until the grandfather clock in the corner chimed the hour. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "I like you, Eleanor. You remind me of my late wife. She didn't take prisoners either." He sat down, wincing slightly at the stiffness in his knees. "I will fund you. $2 million in seed capital. But there are conditions. First, you disappear. Derek cannot know you are in the city. Second, you need a proxy. A face for the company. Someone to shake hands and cut ribbons while you pull the strings." "I can't trust anyone," Eleanor said quickly. "You can trust my grandson," Arthur said. "Lucas. He's brilliant with people, terrible with numbers. He needs a purpose and you need a shield. He will be the CEO on paper. You will be the chairman of the board and the chief architect. You will hold 51% of the voting stock through a blind trust. To the world, you don't exist." It was a deal with the devil, or perhaps a guardian angel. Eleanor took it. The next 3 months were a blur of agony and triumph. Eleanor moved into a secure guest house on Arthur's estate. She worked 20 hours a day. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, building the digital infrastructure of Ether Systems. Lucas Penhaligon, a charming 30-year-old with a smile that could sell ice to polar bears, became the public face. He was the puppet. She was the master. But the stress took its toll. One rainy Tuesday in November, just as Ether was preparing to go live with its first major contract, a deal to manage the supply chain for a national grocery conglomerate, Eleanor felt a sharp tearing pain. She was in the server room she had built in the basement, the hum of cooling fans filling the air. She gasped, grabbing the edge of the desk. The water broke, splashing onto the anti-static floor mats. "Not now," she gritted out, breathing through the contraction. "The handshake protocol isn't finished." She sat back down, sweat beading on her forehead. The code was compiling. If she stopped now, the system would crash and the contract would be void. Vance Logistics was bidding on the same contract. If Ether failed today, Derek won. She typed with one hand, gripping her belly with the other. The pain was blinding, a white-hot lance through her spine. She screamed a raw, primal sound that was swallowed by the hum of the servers. "Ms. Sterling!" It was the housekeeper, Maria, rushing in with towels. "The ambulance is here. You must go." 2 minutes, Eleanor yelled, her vision blurring. "I need 2 minutes." She forced her mind to focus through the haze of agony. Line 402, syntax error. She corrected it. Line 510, latency issue. She rerouted the packets. Compile. The screen flashed green, system online. Optimization 99.8%. Only then did she allow herself to collapse. She woke up hours later in a private hospital suite paid for by Arthur. The room was dim and quiet. Beside her in a clear plastic bassinet lay a tiny bundle wrapped in blue. Eleanor reached out her hand, trembling. She touched the baby's cheek. He was warm, real. "Leo," she whispered, tears finally spilling over. "We did it, Leo." Arthur walked in, looking somber. He held a tablet in his hand. "How is he?" Arthur asked softly. "He's perfect," Eleanor said. "And the contract?" Arthur turned the tablet around. The headline on TechCrunch read, "Newcomer Ether Systems snaps up $50 million. Contract stock of Vance Logistics tumbles 12%. "You drew first blood," Arthur said. "Derek gave a press conference an hour ago. He looked unwell. He blamed market volatility. But we know the truth. You just took his biggest client." Eleanor looked down at her son, a fierce protectiveness surging through her. She wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. She was building a fortress. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice hard. "I don't just want his clients, Arthur. I want his legacy." 5 years is a lifetime in the tech world. In that span, empires can rise and fall. Ether Systems had become a behemoth. It was the invisible nervous system of the global economy, managing everything from pharmaceutical shipments to Amazonian drone deliveries. The company was headquartered in a sleek, needle-like skyscraper in downtown Seattle, affectionately dubbed the Spire. Eleanor Sterling stood on the top floor of that spire, looking down at the city through floor-to-ceiling glass. She was unrecognizable from the woman who had wept in the lawyer's office. She wore a tailored crimson suit that cost more than her old car. Her hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob, and her posture was steel-spined. She was no longer just Eleanor. In the industry, she was known only as the architect. Very few people outside the C-suite knew her face. To the public, Lucas Penhaligon was the Golden Boy CEO, but everyone in the boardroom knew he didn't make a move without checking his tablet, where Eleanor sent him commands in real time. "Quarterly reports are in," Lucas said, walking into her office. He looked tired. "Vance Logistics is hemorrhaging cash. They missed their earnings projection by 40%. Again." Eleanor didn't turn around. "And Derek?" "He's desperate," Lucas replied, pouring himself a drink. "Rumor is he's liquidating assets. He sold the vacation home in Aspen last month and—" Lucas hesitated. "And what—" "He's putting the flagship building in Mercia Heights up for collateral. He's trying to secure a high-interest loan to modernize their fleet. He thinks if he buys new automated trucks, he can compete with us." Eleanor finally turned. Her eyes were cold. He's trying to patch a sinking ship with gold tape. Who is the lender? Vanguard Credit. Buy the debt, Eleanor said instantly. Lucas choked on his drink. Eleanor, that's high risk. If Vance defaults, which he will, we're left with a fleet of rusting trucks in a building we don't need. I don't want the trucks, Eleanor said, walking to her desk. I want the leverage. Buy the debt, Lucas. Use the shell company Nebula Holdings. Keep our name off it. He's going to be at the masquerade ball tonight. Lucas mentioned changing the subject. The charity gala for the Children's Hospital. He's the keynote speaker. Or he was supposed to be. The board replaced him with me this morning. Eleanor paused. He'll still show up. Derek's ego wouldn't let him stay away. He'll go to try and network to find a savior. Are you going? Eleanor had avoided public events for 5 years. She stayed in the shadows raising Leo, who was now a bright, curious 5-year-old attending a private Montessori school under a pseudonym. But tonight felt different. The net was closing. Yes, Eleanor said. It's time I saw him. Up close. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was dripping with crystals and velvet. The city's elite were there, hiding behind elaborate masks of feathers, gold, and silk. It was a sea of anonymity, the perfect hunting ground for a woman who didn't want to be found. Eleanor wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the night sky and a Venetian mask that covered the upper half of her face. She moved through the crowd like smoke, unnoticed yet commanding attention. She spotted him near the bar. Derek looked awful. He had gained weight, his face puffy and red. The expensive suit he wore seemed ill-fitting, as if he had shrunk inside it. Jessica was there too, but she wasn't clinging to his arm anymore. She was flirting openly with a young hedge fund manager a few feet away, ignoring Derek completely. Eleanor signaled the bartender for a sparkling water. She stood next to Derek. Rough night, she asked, altering the pitch of her voice slightly. Derek scoffed, downing a scotch. He didn't look at her. He was staring hatefully at Lucas Penhaligon, who was on stage accepting an award. See that guy? That preening peacock, he stole my life. Did he? Eleanor asked coolly. Or did he just build a better boat? Derek turned to her, his eyes narrowing behind his black mask. You don't understand, business lady. It's not about the boat. It's about sabotage. Ether. They must have a spy. Someone inside my company feeding them data. There's no other explanation for how they beat me to every contract by mere hours. Eleanor suppressed a smile. It wasn't a spy. It was math. She knew his algorithms because she wrote them. She knew their flaws. She knew exactly when his servers would bottleneck, and she timed her sales calls for exactly those moments when his clients were frustrated. Maybe you just underestimated the competition, Eleanor suggested. Or maybe you underestimated the people you left behind. Derek slammed his glass down. I didn't leave anyone behind who mattered. I carried that company. Me. Everyone else was dead weight, especially my ex-wife. If I hadn't cut her loose, I'd be broke right now. And look at you now, Eleanor murmured. The picture of success. Derek bristled, his face flushing darker red. Who are you? Before she could answer, a commotion broke out near the stage. Jessica was shouting. She had had too much to drink and was making a scene with the hedge fund manager. I'm leaving you, Derek, Jessica screamed, her voice cutting through the polite chatter of the gala. You're broke. You're drowning. I'm not going down with you. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Derek. He looked like a deer in headlights, stripped naked before the very people he tried to impress. Eleanor watched, feeling a strange lack of satisfaction. She thought she would enjoy this moment. But seeing him so pathetic, so small, it just felt hollow. He wasn't a titan anymore. He was just a man who had made a terrible mistake. She leaned in close to him, her lips brushing his ear. Check your debt notifications tomorrow morning, Derek, she whispered, dropping her voice to its natural register. Vanguard sold your loan. You have a new creditor. Derek froze. He knew that voice. He whipped his head around, his eyes wide with shock and recognition. Ellie. But she was already gone, slipping into the crowd, a shadow in blue, disappearing into the night. As Eleanor walked out of the hotel into the cool night air, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas. Message: "It's done. We own the debt. We own him." Eleanor looked at the message, then up at the moon. The takeover was hostile, yes. But the real twist was yet to come. She didn't want to destroy Vance Logistics. She wanted to reclaim it. It was her code, after all. She typed a reply: "Initiate Phase 2. Foreclosure proceedings begin Monday. But offer him a meeting. I want to look him in the eye when I take his keys." She got into her waiting car. "Home," she told the driver. "I have to read a bedtime story." The war was effectively over. Now the execution began. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Derek Vance sat in his office, the blinds drawn against the gray Seattle light. His headache was a rhythmic thumping behind his eyes, a souvenir from the gala where he had been publicly humiliated by his mistress and terrified by a ghost. "Check your debt notifications," the woman in the blue mask had whispered. He stared at the email on his screen. It was official. Vanguard Credit had divested his portfolio. His loan totaling $12 million secured against the Vance Logistics headquarters, and his personal stock options was now held by Nebula Holdings, LLC. Derek had spent the entire weekend trying to find out who was behind Nebula Holdings. He had called every contact in his Rolodex. Private investigators, banking insiders, even a shady ex-cop he used for intimidation tactics. They all came back with the same answer: Nebula was a ghost. A shell company registered in the Caymans, buried under layers of trusts. Mr. Vance, his secretary, a terrified young woman named Sarah, peeked through the door. "The fleet manager's on line 1. He says the tracking system is down again. Drivers in the Midwest are driving blind. They don't know where to drop the cargo. Tell him to switch to manual manifests." Derek roared, throwing a paperweight across the room. It shattered a vase. "Use paper maps if they have to. Just get the damn trucks moving." Sarah nodded and fled. Derek slumped back in his chair. He was bleeding out. Ether Systems was strangling him. Every time he bid on a contract, Ether undercut him by 5% and offered faster delivery times. It was impossible, unless they were cheating. The thought he had at the party resurfaced. Sabotage. He didn't believe in coincidences. The woman at the party knew about the debt before he did. She sounded like Eleanor, but that was impossible. Eleanor was a mousy, quiet woman who liked knitting and cheap wine. She wasn't a corporate shark in a couture gown. No, this was corporate espionage. Ether had stolen his original code, Eleanor's code, and improved it. They were using his own intellectual property against him. A dark resolve settled over him. If they wanted a war, he would give them a nuclear winter. He unlocked a burner phone from his safe and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Silas?" Derek said when the line clicked open. "I have a job. High risk, high reward. I need you to break into Ether Systems." Silas was a corporate mercenary, a hacker who sold secrets to the highest bidder. "Ether. That's a fortress, Vance. Their encryption is quantum grade. It'll cost you." "I don't care about the cost," Derek hissed. "I want their source code, specifically the dynamic routing algorithm, and I want you to plant a virus. Something nasty. Wipe their database. If I go down, they go down with me. 50 grand up front. 50 when the servers melt. Done." Derek hung up, a cruel smile touching his lips. He poured himself a drink. He felt like he was back in control. He didn't know that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Across the city, in the penthouse of the Spire, a red alert flashed on a massive monitor wall. Eleanor was feeding Leo his breakfast oatmeal with dinosaur-shaped blueberries when her tablet pinged. She glanced at it, and her eyes narrowed. "Alert, unauthorized incursion detected. Sector 7 firewall." She tapped the notification. The system traced the IP address instantly. It was bouncing through servers in Russia and Brazil, but the signature was sloppy. It was Silas. She recognized his digital footprint from a security audit she had read years ago. "Mommy, are you listening?" Leo asked, tugging her sleeve. Sorry, sweetie, Eleanor said, smoothing his hair. Mommy has to put a very bad bug in a jar. She walked to her workstation. Most CEOs would call the FBI. Eleanor didn't want the police involved. She wanted justice. She watched the intruder trying to brute force his way into the Ether mainframe. He was looking for the ghost path algorithm. You want the code? She whispered, her fingers flying across her mechanical keyboard. I'll give it to you. She didn't block him. Instead, she created a sandbox, a fake environment that looked exactly like the Ether internal server. Inside, she placed a file labeled Ether Source v4.0 Master. But the file wasn't the source code. It was a mirror virus, a piece of code she had written during her sleepless nights in the studio apartment fueled by spite. She called it the boomerang. If someone downloaded it and tried to compile it on their own system, it wouldn't just fail. It would rewrite the host system's BIOS, locking the hardware and encrypting the hard drives with a key that only she possessed. She watched the progress bar on her screen. Intruder downloading file, 40%, 80%, 100%. Gotcha, she murmured. 2 hours later, Derek was sitting in his server room at Vance Logistics, watching his IT director, a sweaty man named Paul, load the stolen file onto their mainframe. Are you sure about this, Mr. Vance? Paul asked, his hands shaking. This is stolen code. If it has a tracer... Just run it, Derek commanded. This is the fix we need. It will optimize our routes and stop the bleeding. Paul hit execute. For 10 seconds, the screens hummed with activity. Lines of code scrolled faster than the eye could see. Derek held his breath, anticipating the green light of success. Then the screens turned red. A single message appeared on every monitor in the building, from the server room to the receptionist's desk to the dispatch tablets in the trucks across the country. System lockdown initiated. Error: stolen asset detected. Unauthorized user. Derek Vance. Terminating operations. What is that? Derek screamed. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Paul yelled, typing frantically. It's locking me out. It's rewriting the kernel. Oh God, it's encrypting the backups. The lights in the server room flickered and died. The hum of the cooling fans wound down to a terrifying silence. Bring it back up. Derek grabbed Paul by the collar. I can't, Paul choked out. Everything is gone, Mr. Vance. The shipping manifest, the payroll, the client database, the GPS logs. It's all gone. It's just garbage data now. Derek released him, staggering back against the cold metal racks. His phone began to ring. Then the office line. Then Paul's cell. A cacophony of ringtones echoed in the dark room. It was the sound of 1,000 clients realizing their shipments had just vanished off the map. In the silence of the shutdown, Derek's personal cell phone pinged with a text message. He looked at it with trembling hands. It was from Nebula Holdings. Message: We noticed a critical infrastructure failure at your facility. It seems the collateral for our loan has been significantly devalued. We are invoking the acceleration clause. The full amount of $12 million is due immediately, or you can attend a settlement meeting tomorrow at 900 a.m. Address attached. Derek looked at the address. It wasn't a law firm. It wasn't a bank. It was the Spire, the headquarters of Ether Systems. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Nebula was Ether. They hadn't just beaten him. They had baited him into destroying himself. He sank to the floor, the darkness of the server room swallowing him whole. He had no leverage, no company, no money. He had to go to the meeting. He had to beg. The Spire was designed to intimidate. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and white marble with a ceiling so high it seemed to pierce the clouds. Security guards in dark suits stood like statues near the elevators, their earpieces the only sign of life. Derek Vance walked in at 8:55 a.m. He wore his best suit, but it felt like a costume. He hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. The swagger that had defined him for a decade was gone, replaced by a jittery, nervous energy. He approached the reception desk. Derek Vance, here to see the representatives of Nebula Holdings. The receptionist, a young man with a sharp undercut, didn't even look up from his screen. Scan your ID at the turnstile. Elevator 4, top floor. They are expecting you. Top floor, the penthouse. Derek walked to the elevator. His legs felt heavy as if he were walking through water. He stepped inside and the glass pod shot upward, the city shrinking beneath his feet. He saw his own building in the distance, the Vance Logistics Tower, looking small, gray, and dead. When the doors opened, he wasn't greeted by a lawyer. He stepped directly into a sprawling, open-plan office that looked more like a spaceship command deck than a workplace. Silent, focused employees worked at holographic interfaces. No one spoke. The efficiency was terrifying. Mr. Vance. Derek turned. Lucas Penhaligon stood there looking fresh-rested and impossibly young. He wore a casual sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to Derek's desperate formal wear. Penhaligon! Derek spat, trying to summon some of his old fire. So it was you. You're the one who rigged my system. That's illegal. I'll have you arrested for corporate sabotage. Lucas smiled, a pitying look in his eyes. Rigged, Mr. Vance, our logs show that you initiated an unauthorized download of a file from our servers. You stole a logic bomb and detonated it inside your own house. We didn't do anything but provide the rope. You tied the knot. Derek opened his mouth but closed it. He knew Lucas was right. Any investigation would prove Derek hired the hacker. He was trapped. I'm here to settle, Derek said, his voice grating. I'll sell you the fleet, the client list. Just wipe the debt, and unlock my servers so I can pay my employees their severance. I don't have the authority to make that deal, Lucas said lightly. I manage operations. You need to speak to the chairman, the owner of Nebula Holdings, and Ether Systems. I thought you were the owner, Derek said, confused. Me no. Lucas laughed. I'm just the face. The architect is very private. But she made an exception for you. She. The word hung in the air. Lucas gestured toward a massive set of double doors at the end of the hall. Go on in. She's waiting. Derek walked down the long corridor. His heart hammered against his ribs. She. Was it a competitor he had scorned? An heiress? He pushed the heavy oak doors open. The office was vast. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows, matching the storm inside Derek's head. The room was sparsely furnished, a modern couch, a few abstract paintings, and a massive desk made of reclaimed dark wood positioned in front of the window. A high-backed leather chair was turned away from him, facing the storm outside. Smoke from a thin cigarette curled up from the chair. Sit down, Derek, a voice said. Derek froze. His blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. He had heard it every day for 7 years. He had heard it plead for attention, heard it whisper ideas he stole, heard it accept his cruelty with silence. But the timbre was different now. It was deeper, resonant with power. Ellie, he whispered the name, feeling foreign on his tongue. The chair slowly swiveled around. Eleanor Sterling sat there. She didn't look like the woman he had divorced. She looked like a queen on a throne of skulls. Her eyes were clear, sharp, and utterly devoid of fear. She stubbed out the cigarette in a crystal ashtray. Hello, Derek, she said calmly. You look terrible. Derek stumbled back, his knees hitting a chair. He collapsed into it, unable to support his own weight. This is impossible. You're a waitress. You're nothing. I was a waitress, Eleanor corrected. And before that, I was the ghost in your machine. Who did you think wrote the code, Derek? Did you really believe you were the genius? Or did you just repeat the lie so many times you started to believe it? But the money, Derek stammered. Ether. How? I built it, she said simply. While you were skiing in Aspen and buying jewelry for Jessica, I was building the future. And frankly, it wasn't that hard to beat you. You were running a logistics company on 2015 architecture. I'm running one on 2030 logic. She slid a black folder across the desk. It stopped perfectly at the edge right in front of him. This is the acquisition agreement, she said. Derek stared at the folder. You want to buy me out? No, Eleanor said. I'm not buying you out. Buying implies you have something of value to sell. Your company is dead. Your reputation is ruined. You are facing criminal charges for attempted hacking. I am offering you a mercy. She leaned forward, her elbows on the desk. Sign the papers. You transfer full ownership of the building, the remaining assets, and the intellectual property rights to the name Vance to Nebula Holdings. In exchange, I will unlock your payroll server so your 300 employees can get their final checks. And I will drop the federal hacking charges. And for me, Derek asked, his voice trembling, what do I get? Eleanor smiled. It was a terrifying expression. You get to walk away, she said. You get to stay out of prison. That is more than you gave me. You gave me $25,000 and a kick out the door while I was pregnant with your child. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rain hitting the glass. Derek's face went white. Pregnant? You never told me. Why would I? Eleanor asked. So you could use him? So you could turn him into a prop for your family man image? No. I raised him alone. He is smart, Derek. He is kind. And he has never needed you. Derek looked at the papers. Then he looked at Eleanor. For the first time, he saw the magnitude of his failure. He hadn't just lost a company. He had thrown away a dynasty. If I don't sign, then I release the logs of your hacking attempt to the FBI in 10 minutes, Eleanor said, checking her watch. And I let your employees know that you personally destroyed the company to save your own ego. You won't just be broke, Derek. You'll be a pariah. You'll be the man who burned down the house because he couldn't find the light switch. She picked up a pen, a cheap plastic Bic pen, the kind she used to use when they were poor, and tossed it to him. Sign it. Use the name you made so famous, because after today, it belongs to me. The sound of the cheap plastic pen scratching against the paper was the loudest noise in the universe. To Derek Vance, it sounded like a guillotine blade dropping. With each signature, he severed a limb of the identity he had built for 20 years. Derek Vance. Sign. Derek Vance. Sign. Derek Vance. Sign. He pushed the stack of papers back across the desk. His hand felt numb. It's done, he croaked. The building, the fleet, the patents. They're yours. Eleanor didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She simply picked up the folder, verified the signatures with a glance, and placed it into a drawer. Thank you, Derek, she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he once knew. Paul has already received the unlock key. Your servers are rebooting as we speak. Your employees will be paid by 500 p.m. And the hacking charges? Buried, Eleanor said. Consider it my final gift to you. You get to keep your freedom. Do try to do something useful with it this time. Derek stood up. He felt lightheaded, as if gravity had shifted. He looked around the office one last time, the office of the woman he had called useless. It was a temple of power, and he was being exiled from it. Ellie. He started, a sudden pathetic urge to apologize rising in his throat. Maybe if he said sorry, she would give him a crumb. A consulting job. Anything. Don't... She cut him off sharp as a knife. Don't ruin the silence, Derek. It's the only dignified thing you have left. He nodded, swallowed hard, and turned to the door. He walked down the long corridor past the holographic displays and the silent, efficient workers. None of them looked up. He was already a ghost to them. He reached the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he stepped out into the cavernous atrium. He needed air. He needed a drink. He needed to wake up from this nightmare. Mommy said 5 minutes, a bright voice chirped. Derek paused. Near the security desk, a small boy was sitting on a velvet bench, swinging his legs. He was wearing a miniature trench coat and holding a toy truck, a Vance Logistics branded truck, Derek realized with a jolt. The boy looked up. He had messy brown hair and eyes that were a piercing familiar shade of hazel. Derek's breath hitched. He knew those eyes. He saw them in the mirror every morning. The boy saw Derek staring and held up the truck. "Vroom!" The boy smiled, innocent and bright. "My truck is stuck in the mud. I'm waiting for the rescue team." Derek took a trembling step forward. "What's your name, son?" "Leo," the boy said. "Leo." Derek repeated the name, tasting like ash. "Do you know who owns that truck?" "My mom used to," Leo said matter-of-factly. "But she says it's broken. She's gonna fix it with robots." The elevator dinged behind Derek. The sound of heels clicking on marble echoed through the lobby. "Leo!" Eleanor's voice rang out. The boy jumped off the bench, his face lighting up. "Mommy!" He ran past Derek, ignoring him completely, and buried his face in Eleanor's legs. Eleanor stood 10 feet away from Derek. She placed a protective hand on Leo's head, her fingers stroking his hair. She looked at Derek with a gaze that was terrifying in its finality. There was no anger left, just a wall of ice. "He has my eyes," Derek whispered, his voice breaking. "No," Eleanor said softly, loud enough only for him to hear. "He has my vision. You just provided the biology, and you signed away your rights to that too 5 years ago." She looked down at Leo. "Come on, Bug. Let's go get ice cream. We have a big victory to celebrate." "Did the bad man sign the papers?" Leo asked loudly, pointing a small finger at Derek. Eleanor didn't look back at Derek. She took her son's hand and walked toward the revolving doors. "Yes, Leo, the bad man is gone. He won't bother us ever again." Derek stood frozen in the lobby. He watched them walk out into the rain. He watched the valet open the door to a sleek black car. He watched his son, his flesh and blood, the heir he had always wanted but never deserved, climb into a life that had no room for him. The security guard cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Your visitor pass has expired." Derek looked at the guard. He wanted to scream. He wanted to fight. But he had nothing left to fight with. He walked out the doors. The rain soaked him instantly, ruining his suit, plastering his hair to his skull. He stood on the sidewalk surrounded by the bustling city of Seattle. People rushed past him, focused on their phones, their lives, their destinations. He looked up at the skyscraper across the street, the Vance Logistics Tower. As he watched, the lights on the massive logo atop the building flickered. V-A-N-C-E. Then one by one they went dark. The power had been cut. The name was gone. Derek Vance turned up his collar and walked into the gray, wet afternoon, a man who had owned the world and sold it for a moment of arrogance. The Golden Standard 3 years later. The warehouse was cold, smelling of cardboard and diesel fumes. It was a fulfillment center for a mid-tier grocery chain in Ohio. "Hey, Vance, move it!" the shift supervisor yelled. "Line 4 is backed up. Stop daydreaming and load the pallets." Derek Vance, now 48 and looking 55, flinched. "On it, boss," he muttered. He bent down his back, groaning in protest, and lifted a heavy crate of canned soup. He placed it on the conveyor belt. His hands were calloused, his fingernails dirty. The Rolex was long gone, pawned to pay for a lawyer who couldn't save his house. Jessica was gone, married to the hedge fund manager in Miami. The friends were gone. He was just a number. Employee number 4920. He wiped sweat from his forehead and glanced at the break room TV, which was always tuned to the news. A headline flashed across the screen. Tech titan Eleanor Sterling donates $500 million to STEM education. Derek froze. He stared at the screen. There she was. Eleanor. She looked radiant, standing at a podium in front of a gleaming, futuristic building. It was the old Vance Logistics headquarters, but it had been stripped down and rebuilt with glass and vertical gardens. The reporter's voice cut through the noise of the warehouse. Ms. Sterling, formerly known as the Ghost CEO, today unveiled the Leo Sterling Institute for Technology. The building, once the headquarters of a failed logistics firm, has been transformed into a tuition-free coding academy for underprivileged women and single mothers. Ms. Sterling: what motivated this transformation? The camera zoomed in on Eleanor. She smiled a genuine warm smile that Derek had never seen directed at him. "I wanted to build something that lasts," Eleanor said into the microphone. "I wanted to prove that you don't need to be ruthless to be powerful. You just need to be enduring. This building used to represent ego. Now it represents opportunity. We wiped the slate clean." "And what about your past?" the reporter asked. "Any regrets?" Eleanor paused. For a split second she seemed to look directly into the camera piercing through the screen across the miles straight into the dingy warehouse in Ohio. "No regrets," she said. "Every scar was a lesson, and I learned them all." Derek stared at the screen until the supervisor shouted at him again. "Vance, I'm docking your pay if that belt stops again." Derek looked down at his hands. He looked back at the screen, but the image had changed to the weather report. Eleanor was gone. He turned back to the conveyor belt. The belt moved relentlessly, carrying boxes away just as time had carried away his life. He picked up another box. It was heavy, but he had to carry it. It was the only thing he had left to hold. In Seattle, Eleanor turned off the microphone. She walked off the stage and down the steps where a 10-year-old Leo was waiting for her. "Did you do good, Mom?" Leo asked, handing her a bottle of water. "I did great," Eleanor said, taking his hand. "Now, are you ready for your coding lesson? You promised to help me fix the bugs in the drone protocol." "I'm ready," Leo said confidently. "I think I found a better way to route the traffic." "Show me," Eleanor said, beaming. They walked together toward the shining glass building, leaving the shadow of the past behind them, stepping into a future that they had written code by line of code together. So there you have it. Derek Vance thought he held all the cards because his name was on the door, but he forgot that a name is just ink power, is the person holding the pen. Eleanor proved that true strength isn't about how loud you can shout in a boardroom. It's about the quiet, relentless intelligence to build a fortress while your enemy is busy buying curtains. She didn't just survive the divorce, she optimized it. She turned her pain into an empire and her silence into a weapon that dismantled a tyrant without firing a single shot. What would you have done in Eleanor's position? Would you have offered Derek that final mercy, or would you have let him go to prison? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma, resilience, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next drama. Until next time, keep writing your own story.